ISIS was a reason that I needed to find out quickly about what do I believe in. It made it urgent. And when I read in the Islamic books, there was alarming things. There was verses of the Quran. There was Salafi imams on TVs funded by all money by Saudi Arabia on Qanat al-Nas and Qanat Iqra in Arabic, and they would go out and they would talk about all the gender inequality that they think is good. They would talk about slavery, taking slaves from as a booty from war, and they would still romanticize it, and that was for me morally repulsive, to be honest. And I believe that there are other better versions of Islam. I believe that maybe those versions, those interpretations, let's say, should be more dominant, and I see that is happening, hopefully.
So safe, the thing is...
But then when religion is so divided, when you see that Islam is so divided, that's like, if God is behind this, it wouldn't have been like this. It wouldn't have been that there's a bunch of terrorists and a bunch of... I'm not talking only Islam. In many other, in Hinduism and Christianity, there's the same. I don't think God would be behind any one of those religions in this way.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm not going to justify it by saying, Hindus are like this or Christians are like this, because I understand that's not going to be logical from my side. So Saif, because I look into this stuff, and one of the reasons for you it was ISIS, for me it was 9/11, because when I was young, 9/11 happened, and everywhere I looked, people were pointing fingers at my religion, saying, it's Muslims, it's Islam, and then I had to look into it as well. So, and then I did, but I think we both came to different conclusions towards the end. But the thing is, one needs to understand, like, are you aware where ISIS actually stemmed from and why they stemmed?
According to what I see,
you said you've researched it.
When you talk politically and stuff, of course they got support from different groups, and I'm not going to go into that because there's a lot of unknown facts. But I think the ideology stems from the closest thing I would say is Wahhabi, Salafi, Islam, to be honest. I don't know what the Prophet preached, but throughout the chain, I think there have been bad apples that might have led to extremist groups.
I guess what I'm saying, Saif, is why did that group start?
Why did that group start? They wanted to, I think it was a bunch of extremists around the world that were unhappy, and they wanted to create an Islamic state where they practice Sharia, and I think that was a dream. I think that was what's being sold to those men, those young men, because I know, because I also faced part of the propaganda. And just when you talked about 9/11, I have recordings, and I've watched the imams motivating men to go fight in Afghanistan and join al-Mujahideen that then became so. Throughout also my lifetime, and even what I've seen in near history, there has been Muslim imams and sheikhs on the wrong side of history that use religion to motivate, I'd say, politics, to be honest. They have a political agenda and they recruit through religion. And I think that's very sad for a religion, because religion is about God, it's about spirituality. It's not about politics and him invading and war. I don't think it should be about that.
Okay, I think maybe we kind of missed the point there. So just going back to the original point, how ISIS started. I'm just going to give you an analogy, and I'm also we're going to discuss what you said about the imams and stuff. I'm not just dismissing that, but because you mentioned it before, I want to give some dedicated time to that. So remind me in case I forget, Saif. So after World War I, Germany, how the state Germany was after the devastating war that took place, it was a vacuum. There was a vacuum, and the country was riddled in debt. It was in a very terrible state, Saif. And that then left it ripe for pickings. Then you had somebody that came and that offered a solution. And we know Hitler idealized, of course, Darwin, and the whole kind of liberal mindset, etc., etc.
I would say liberal, but
You wouldn't?
On Hitler, no, I don't think he was. He was a socialist, and he was nationalist, which is not usually liberal ideologies, especially the nationalism part.
Okay, okay. So maybe like an okay, no problem, no problem. So let's just say with Hitler, when he then came in, he was able to push anything that he wanted. Why? Because of the state of the country. Now, say if I say, oh, there are people in that country that was supporting Hitler. Look at this picture. You know, there's a famous picture of a Hitler sermon. Yeah, he's delivering a sermon and everybody is doing the salute except one person. And there's like a caption saying, be like this one person. Yeah, but the thing is, at that time, it was very difficult because of the torment that these people were going through. Yeah, even if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, forget self-actualization. The person doesn't even have a house, safety or food. There's no kind of, you're not bothered with self-actualization. So forget peace and love and equality. They're not going to be interested in that if they don't even have mere safety. Yeah, sorry. So I'm using that as an analogy to then link it to Iraq. Yeah,
Iraq and Syria. It's in my country. You know, I grew up.
Exactly.
I had to come here because of similar men.
Exactly, exactly. So in Iraq, when this invasion took place, this illegal occupation, illegal war, and they removed Saddam Hussein, who was part of the Ba'athist party. Yeah, and I'm sure you'll agree that just because Saddam was toppled doesn't mean that the Ba'athist mentality and the Ba'athist party was toppled. And you've got academics like Karen Armstrong that further says this also. And she also says that there were people that went, and she, I think, enumerates these in her discussion with Mehdi Hassan on Al Jazeera. She's got a book on Fields of Blood also, which I would recommend. It's a very good book also. And she's of this argument that it's not necessarily religion that leads to war, it's mostly politics. And she's got certain case studies that push this forward. For example, she puts forward 2 case studies that 2 people from the UK that went to join ISIS. One of them used to own a bar. Yeah, he used to sell alcohol. Another individual, he bought a book called Islam for Dummies 2 weeks before. They checked his account and they saw Islam for Dummies. So just imagine, Saif, you're going to fight a holy war and you bought a book called Islam for Dummies a couple of weeks before.
I'm sure on the other side there was this Islam for Dummies, but there was people that were they knew what they were doing exactly.
But then, Saif, what I would argue is then these groups that you said, I would argue that Salafi, Hanafi, all of that is under the umbrella of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Yeah, and then of course you've got the Shia. I haven't come across a single credible academic of a single sect that has claimed what ISIS is doing is correct. Now, Saif, what I will say is, and I will give you the analogy of somebody that does a terrible action and shouts Mr. Bean. Yeah, now does it mean that Mr. Bean is responsible for the actions and he has to respond? Or does it mean that these are people who are trying to claim that when you have mainstream scholars and academics that have shunned them? I can see you want to respond to
that. The Islamic Council, the Islamic Scholars Council in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt, they go easily and call Ahmadiyyas infidels. Yukaffirun, in Arabic it's takfir al-Ahmadiyya, or like saying, declaring Ahmadiyya as infidels. Yes. However, there has been calls, why wouldn't you call ISIS members infidels? Didn't they go out of Islam by committing what they did? And they never did that. They never declared them as non-Muslim. They declared them as, I think, I forgot, I don't have an English translation for the word.
Khawarij.
Khawarij, or like they have descended, or
they're
have
part of a heretical.
Heretic, yeah, they're heretics, but not infidels in a way. And I think that the Mr. Bean argument is that I know there's idiots that join ISIS just because the same reason they become right-wing extremists and shoot people up. Some of them are ideologically motivated, and some of them are just idiots that want to do something violent or get whatever that makes them happy. But I still think the Muslim population needs to look into ISIS and be clear about what came from our books and what did not came from our books. I think that there's what you would call the Islamic heritage of scholarly works throughout the years. Some of them are very problematic. Ibn Taymiyyah is one that is being criticized a lot after especially ISIS came up. And I think it's the same if we would turn a blind eye to the extremism that totally exists in certain scholarly works and in some quotes of the Prophet that are, many people would say are confirmed or not confirmed, which is like a little bit ambiguous when it comes to...
I want to answer your points. That's why there's quite a few things that you said. So the first, sorry, you said the first thing was that the Saudi Council declared the Ahmadiyyas as kafirs. Yeah, the thing safe is Saudi Arabia doesn't represent all Muslims, and I think going back to my point that there's not a single group, there's not a single sect that claims what ISIS is doing is in line with mainstream Islam, but that they're a part of mainstream Islam. Now the thing safe is for us to declare somebody as kafir, there has to be something that is integral in their doctrine, their aqidah, their faith. Now with Ahmadiyya, they believe that there is another prophet that came after Muhammad, peace be upon him. But with the Khawarij, it's again, yes, we can say that there's certain things that are incorrect or whatnot, but to declare somebody as disbeliever, that's a very heavy statement. It's a very categorical statement to being made. But I stick by what I said, which is, again, had you been able to stand there and say, because if you said, look, Saudi said that what ISIS is doing is correct, you've got Sheikh Qardawi of Egypt saying, what is it, Mufti Taqi al-Uthmani of Deoband saying this correct, or Akram Nadwi, then I would say, okay, this is a problem that we have. But yet, Saif, the fact that you're unable to give me a single such person shows that there is unanimous agreement within the ummah of Muslims that these individuals are not following Islam as it should be followed. What they're doing is widely condemned, and there is a clear disjunct. Now, because myself, I have to deal with these sorts of claims and these people, so I have to look into it. And I'm telling you, Saif, I have not come across a single instance where a single scholar has said, you know what they've done is correct. Yeah, beheading people that are innocent, willy-nilly, killing Muslims just because, in fact, they kill, Sunnis as well, because they believe that they don't follow their mentality. So, and also, if I may also add, there's one other point that, with these groups, Saif, the thing is, of course, we know that when these groups come, they can be curbed. Yeah, like we know the 969 of the Buddhist group, the Hindutva of India. The reason why they're growing is because they're state-sponsored. Now, what was interesting about ISIS was this ISIS actually started, and there's this discussion by, I think his name is Colonel Flynn. He's in discussion with Mehdi Hassan on Al Jazeera. You can check it out on YouTube. And he's saying, look, I accept that because they had camps like Camp Nama. Yeah, it's called Nasty Ass Military something. Yeah, I've forgotten the last acronym. But they had these very strange places, and that's where ISIS actually grew from. And then John Kerry, he was Secretary of Defense at that time. And you can check this again, it's on YouTube. He said it in a recording as well. He said we allowed ISIS to grow. Why? To put pressure on Bashar al-Assad. So it was strategically, we allowed them to grow. Yeah. But then when we noticed that, of course, Bashar allied himself with Russia, by then it was too late. The group had morphed into something. And of course there were other groups like Al-Nusra and so. They were very weak groups. They were being supported by the United States to weaken ISIS. But what would happen was they were too weak, and when they would be taken over by ISIS, their weapons would then go into the possession of ISIS. So indirectly they were grown. And Hillary Clinton also is speaking to seniors, and she's saying, look, we funded the Mujahideen.
Yeah,
against
that's well known. Yeah.
So what Saif needs to be distinguished here is the kind of elite where you've got state leaders and you've got geopolitics taking place, and then you compare it with the everyday awam, yeah, the everyday kind of followers. Now, I'm sure you'll appreciate also that the laws that, or the mentality that we're going through are not going to be adopted by the people that are in a concentration camp, open air camp of Gaza, of Palestine. Yeah, I'm sure you can also appreciate what they're going through, yeah, and the heartache and what they're going through as well. So I guess the point that I'm trying to say, my friend, is don't extrapolate from geopolitical issues. For example, you cannot attribute what the Muslim Ummah has gone through with regards to the drawing of borders. You cannot claim what other people are going through with regards to the Berlin Conference that Africa went through. Yeah, where borders were drawn, the Berlin Conference. The Sykes-Picot Treaty post-Ottoman Empire, where borders were drawn. Balfour Declaration, in which Palestine was literally handed on a platter to the Israelis. Yeah,
I think, to be honest, I acknowledge the geopolitical conditions, but I think whoever straps a bomb around himself and goes and clicks the button to explode and kill civilians in my city, in Damascus, there have been a lot of explosions. Those people aren't backed by Western ideology, they aren't backed by America or Russia or anybody. There is an underlying extremist ideology. I'm not saying it's the whole religion, but I think it's hiding somewhere inside.
Let me give you an example.
And just sorry, Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden and Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, very known worldwide terrorists, they used to be praised on Al Jazeera, praised on Arabic TVs. Hassan Nasrallah, who's also another terrorist, people of my family had his picture as a background of their phone. There is a problem of romanticizing war and terrorism in the Muslim population, and there is a problem of youth, like you say, awam youth, being motivated by certain sheikhs, certain imams to go and fight wars. I think Islam is being used by too many people in a...
You've hit the nail on the head now.
Yeah, they're being used by too many people to motivate youth to go and fight wars.
You've hit the nail on the head now.
Yeah.
Using Islam. And this is not strictly for Muslims either. This was done even during Afghanistan when it was fighting the Soviet Union. Religion was used also by the Americans there also. Yeah, and religion continues to be used now in India. Yeah, shunning Christians, shunning the Dalits, shunning the Muslims is being done on a state level. Why? By hiding under the pretense of Hinduism. But is it actual Hinduism? It's not. It's the RSS ideology. Yeah, and it's the same. If you speak to Orthodox Jewish people, they don't even accept that that land is their land. Yeah, they say it's not our land, and we shouldn't be claiming that. However, Israel is also hiding behind the Old Testament. Yeah, so what I will say, Saif, is this is something that's not common to Islam. However, according to Georgia State University, there was a research that they posted that Muslim perpetrators of terror get 4.5 times more coverage in the media than people of other faiths. In fact, the ADL posted research, a figure, ADL and the Europol, where they said that post 9/11, 73% of the attacks that have taken place are done by far rights. Yeah, but you don't see this being reflected. Yeah, and if I was to ask you, Saif, why this discrepancy when we know it's far right, but then you've got leaders like Donald Trump that didn't even accept, wasn't willing to condemn the far right. Muslims are getting more coverage. What would you say the reason is according to your neutral understanding?
Well, I totally believe that Western media portrays Muslims and actions portrayed by certain people they cover it more and they cover it in a different way, and that's a game of the media.
That's very honest of you.
Yeah, of course. But And of course, Trump or whatever. That's I'm not going to even go.
Next question should be, why do they?
Why do they?
That's a good question.
Political leanings. People have agendas. Groups have different agendas. Countries, sorry, political.
I'll do it. I'm used to it.
I don't know what their motivation is. What I can analyze is that.
I as a Muslim thought about it. Why do they? And I think Islam is the only religion which is sticking to its ideology, and that seems to be the only obstacle at the moment.
I don't think Islam is sticking to its ideology. Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, the new crown prince, is changing the country. He went out and he publicly distanced himself from Wahhabism, and he said we should understand our religion from our time. So I think it's a big fallacy, a big mistake that many Muslims think that Islam has never changed since the day it came. Islam went through a lot of changes. Islam has been practiced differently in different places and in different times. I think, but people like to look at.
The thing is, Islam being practiced differently doesn't imply Islam has been changed. Because Islam has principles, and because Islam, when we talk about Islam, I'm talking about the final testament and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We believe, obviously, Islam didn't start 1400 years ago, but there are principles. Oh my God, that was massive. There's a giant bee that was the size of a fist. We don't believe Islam has been changed. But there is a methodology that makes Islam such that it's able to be practiced by people of different cultures, different countries. It's something that is practicable. But I think we went on a tangent there.
I think back to ISIS, one of the main issues me and many people have with ISIS is the point that they enslaved Yazidi girls, they made them into sex slaves, they bought them and sold them, and that was one of the things that they did not invent. There was Suq al-Nakhasa, is a famous thing in Arabic literature and history. We know that there has been slave trade until the West. I'm gonna put the West until the West came and made Gulf countries sign agreements to stop with slavery and trading with slaves. I think that's a huge issue for any religion that claims to be from God in any certain way, to acknowledge or to legalize or to deal with in any way the sale of.
But the thing, Saif, is also we romanticize this fact that the West pinned down and said, look, let's end slavery. But bear in mind, until about 3-4 years ago, this country that we're living in at the moment was still giving reparations to slave owners. So let's also give the complete context as well. If it was such an evil thing, then we should have abolished it completely. Don't take taxpayers' money and then still continue to give reparations for such heinous acts also, because that is within the liberal framework. Giving reparations back, because again this is capitalist society that we're living in. But I think we're juggling a lot of things at the moment.
I think we're juggling only. I think let's go to ISIS, let's go to why I left Islam, because extremism, because ISIS, because slavery.
But I think that discussion was very good in the sense that you've acknowledged that Islam has a disproportionate kind of media coverage based upon, correct me if I'm wrong, political leanings and other leanings, like for example the presence of natural resources, especially after even pre-petrodollar, when Saudi raised the price of petrol and America pretty much came to a standstill. And what happened was then America said, look, we have to deal with this, we have to sort this out. And in fact, in Secret Affairs by Mark Curtis, he gives a copious amount of quotes where you had high-level leaders saying that it's within our interests that the Middle East stays divided. Why? Because, and we see, again, you can read literature of even likes of Gamal Abdel Nasser. You know?
Yeah, of course, Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. That he wanted Arabs to come together in one kind of unit, and there were issues, and the British have admitted, openly, these are declassified documents, that they tried to assassinate him. Different by poisoning his chocolates. However pathetic that sounds, but they attempted to poison his dairy milk chocolates and the likes. But the point that I'm trying to say is, it's not as simple as it's an ideology thing. there is something, for example, even in India, when the British were ruling over India for 180 years, the brutal colonization, they noticed that there was a disunity between the Hindus and the Muslims, and they said this is brilliant for us, and they capitalized on this. Yeah, this divide and conquer mentality. Yeah, and this is what they do. Let me give you another example.
Well, let me comment. Like the invading powers exploiting division is evil. But where does it? Like, but I am against the notion that they create the division. Shia and Sunnis didn't start because of a Western or American, let's say, conspiracy.
I agree with you.
And then all the caliphs, like I think more caliphs died being killed throughout Muslim empire than normal death because of also turmoil and because of this dynasty wants to take from that dynasty. And when go back to the media section, I know that Western media has a bias toward the Muslim world, and I know also Western media within itself, some of it has a capitalist bias, conservative, liberal bias, and I know that Al Jazeera has a bias against Europe and America, so every media has bias. Having bias by a certain media against you doesn't say anything about you and just how the world works and how media works, I think.
Okay.
So those are the 2 points we packed.
Right, no problem. So the thing, what you're doing, Saif, is you're conflating the power of the Western media and its influence over the globe compared to Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera comes from Qatar. Yeah, the influence of Al Jazeera cannot be compared to, say, Rupert Murdoch's empire, which spans over many countries. And the funding, if you compare the funding of it, if you compare the amount of print papers, you compare the amount of channels it's featured on, again, I covered the funding, and the amount of journalists that they've had is chalk and cheese. So that's why there would be extensive amount of research, and I would say the influence of the Western media is more stronger, and that's why you've got the likes of course, the Taliban that are also, even in what they were doing, they were kowtowing to the Western media because they know that the Western media has a greater influence than, say, Al Jazeera and Qatar. So that was one point that you said. The other one you were talking about was the Khalifas being killed. But we don't have an issue with that. In fact, the Prophet, peace be upon him, prophesied, and he told us that after the death of Uthman radiallahu anh, the third Khalif, Abu Bakr, Umar, then Uthman, bloodshed, it will continue, and there will be issues within the Ummah. But again, that's not to say that Islam is incorrect, that there's an issue with Islam, because these prophecies were given, number one, to distinguish and to warn the people to how to conduct themselves, and number two, that there's a clear decadence within the Ummah. As we approach the end of times, people naturally are turning slowly away from religion, and it's not because religion doesn't appeal to them, because sometimes I would say, as the Prophet prophesied, knowledge will be taken from you. Like just in the last couple of years, very key Islamic and Muslim figures, imams, scholars have died. Yeah, great amount of literature has been lost. So the death of Khalifas isn't necessarily I would say a point of contention, or a point that is an issue for us. However, it just shows that as we're approaching the end of times, decadence within the Ummah is happening. However, we're not here to defend Muslims. We're here to defend Islam. We're here to defend the texts of Islam. Because if I'm here to defend Muslims and you're here to defend the founder of liberalism, John Locke, you're gonna be, especially when what John Locke has said about apostasy, when permitting that for the Jewish people, and of course John Stuart Mill, and all sorts of issues. I'm sure both of us would eventually conclude by saying, you know what, he doesn't represent the liberal kind of ideology, and I would say ISIS, I would say Al Qaeda doesn't represent that ideology. But Saif, I would also say that even 969. Do you know who the 969 are?
969er.
969 terrorist group.
No, not. Is it the I know the 7/11.
That was a terrorist attack that took place in London. No.
Oh, no, okay.
969 is an extremist Buddhist group. Yeah, and that is the main extremist Buddhist group. But I would question why you don't know, because a lot of Muslims have died in Myanmar because of the 969. Have you heard, I know I mentioned RSS, have you heard of the Hindutva group?
I think so, yeah. I wrote a small, I work a little bit in this domain, so yes. Yeah.
Very good. When's the last time that you heard or you saw the Hindutva being covered in the mainstream media in this country?
Well, no, that has not been covered. I don't watch British media, so I cannot speak for that, but I can say in general, it's not a topic that's covered.
But Saif, I've been following Indian news for, I would say, the best part of half a year to a year. And I'm telling you, there's certain things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. In fact, last week, this was an issue. This happened in India, where there were protests taking place against the police. And there was somebody that was attacked, and there was a journalist who went and he stomped on the face. In Assam, in India. Yeah, still in India. So he stomped on the face of this Muslim. And the police were there. They were very reluctantly, they kind of pulled him away. And then you could see a policeman was hugging him thereafter. You now compare this with Dylan Roof in America when he did a mass shooting. Yeah, after doing a mass shooting in the church, he went with the police and said, barefaced, "I'm hungry." The police took him for Burger King. Yeah, the point that I'm trying to say, Saif, is there is a clear bias. Yeah, and the bias is very, very clear. Yeah, and to then say that, okay, it's Islam, I will say, look, there's extreme elements everywhere. However, I would argue, Saif, with the extreme elements in Islam, it's being facilitated. It's being facilitated by certain countries for their nefarious ends. And I agree with you. And you mentioned this point, and I agree with you that these points are not planted in by the West. I'm not going to make that fallacious reasoning. It exists there, just like it exists with any other ideology, any other faith or religion, in any other household. Like if my child watches inappropriate things. If, Saif, I now allow him, I give him a laptop for his room, I don't check his internet history. What I'm doing is I'm facilitating for that desire in him and that addiction to pornography and the likes to grow. However, when I'm kind of on it, I'm like, no, let's have a discussion, mate. Why do you feel the need to do that? Yeah, and you know what? I'm not giving you a device for your room. You're going to watch it in the sitting room where it's a family room, etc. But what I'm arguing is, just like with Hillary Clinton and of course the CIA and the Mujahideen fighting Soviet Union, and even in Iran in about 1951, they had a leader, Mohammad Mossadegh. Yeah, despite his name, he's very secular. And he's the Smile, you know Mohammad Mossadegh? Okay. He was a democratically elected leader. Iran was very liberal democratic. Yeah, the West would see it and think, wow, what a liberalized country. Yeah. However, Mohammad Mossadegh made a mistake. He made a mistake of trying to nationalize BP, British Petroleum. The British had a big problem with that. Yeah, and when they had a big problem with that, they didn't look whether it was a democracy or not a democracy. Thereafter, what they did was they noticed the dissenting voices there, and I would suggest don't take my word for it. There is an academic, Mark Curtis, he talks about this. You can read from neutral historians about what happened with Mohammad Mossadegh, because it's very important to modern day Iran that we see today. And what happened, Saif, was with BP, that was their main thing. And the Ayatollahs were the other groups. And they started kind of going with them and assisting them. And the Shah came in, and then there was a brutal dictatorship, and thereafter the Ayatollahs came in. They received support. Now, I agree with you that the Ayatollahs, their mentality was not given by the West. However, it was fostered and festered.
Yes, exactly. Yeah? I think we're good on this one.
Yeah, it's the same with the Hindutva. Like it's argued that there's this in India, Pakistan. There was this ideology that before it was Hindustan, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and then there was a split. Yeah, Pakistan, which was supposed to be a majority Muslim country, and India, majority Hindu country, and there was this mentality of kind of separation. Yeah, but the thing now is, people argue that there is extreme elements in India. But however, Saif, any leader that came, they did not entertain the extreme Hindu element. But what happened was at that time, not at that time, at this time now, because the leader, Modi, is from RSS, which again has correlatable similarities with Nazism also. This again is, you can read it in Intercept and Guardian, and a lot of academics talk about its similarities to the Nazi mentality. In fact, it's mapped on the RSS, you can research, it's mapped on the Nazi mentality. And even the Brits, they have issue with that. But because the trade is so good with India, in fact, the mere presence of Priti Patel, one of the impetus or one of the positive things was how Britain can have a good relationship with Modi and with India. And that's why they took them off the red list before Pakistan, even though their COVID cases were very high. There's a lot of issues, but the point that I'm trying to say safe is now it's safe. It's safe. It's safe for India to light the flames of extreme Hindu mentality to such a degree, Saif. Check this out. I mean, you've done research as well. You know the amount of lynchings that take place on a regular basis in India. Now it's gone to legislation that Muslims are being kept out. Like we're accepting immigrants from Christian immigrants, Sikh immigrants, and other immigrants, but Muslims are deliberately being left out. Point that I'm trying to say, Saif, I'm sure you've agreed as well, that there is, and the argument, same applies with Saudi, that if Saudi was such an oppressive country and all of this, why is it that the West has been aligning itself with Saudi and has not been giving it liberating the women there, not been giving it a democracy, even though
international politics, my background is in political science. International politics can be explained out of multiple theories, liberalism, Marxism, but the ones that is most relevant here is realism. Realism is all about power, all about interest, and it's how most states operate in the international context, because there's no rules, there's no laws, there's no courts really, and I agree. The Hindu government, the Modi government is not a good example of where states should be in this day and age. I agree that in Pakistan it's the same. In Pakistan it's kind of maybe a little bit of the opposite, where also other minorities are being attacked and being accused of blasphemy when they do. I've written personally a lot of articles about minorities in Pakistan being attacked and temples being sacked because of certain, I think, non-important blasphemy cases. I hope that both those countries move towards a civil state where people are equal, people are free, and people have dignity and rights despite where they.
I hope so too.
I really hope that is in the future.
So I guess just for the viewers that are watching, I guess what I wanted to unpack was this kind of ISIS, Al-Qaeda groups, and it's good that we managed to kind of unpack this to show that there is a disjunct. There is more of an emphasis towards what Islam and Muslims are doing, and because of what is happening, and I think this is one of the points that I missed, certain leaders, certain groups are filling that void of, for example, in Afghanistan, again, both of these articles you can find in The Guardian, like Afghanis that were killed, their bodies were urinated on, and then those, it was in The Guardian that soldiers, they had to, there was disciplinary things going on, but this is ridiculous. There were kind of a dead Afghan's prosthetic leg, they put beer in it and they were drinking from it. They were cutting off fingers of dead Afghans and putting it as trophies. I imagine, and this is information safe that's filtered to us. Imagine now if you are living in that country and that's happened to your father, that's happened to your mother, and day in, day out there's drone attacks. Like I'm sure you've been following what's going on in Afghanistan. I mean, it's difficult not to because it's in our faces with the front covers. And they said, this is about a couple of weeks ago, a drone attack but 20 people died by accident. Sorry. Yeah, and even Australia, they apologize for what happened in Afghanistan and we're disciplining our people. Sorry, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. What about the people there? They need answers straight away. You wake up and your father and mother's gone, and somebody comes and offers a solution. He claims to be an imam or whatnot, but safe. We have ways, like we have a sanad. Yeah, if I am to learn Quran, or if I am to learn Islamic knowledge from you, I need to make sure that there is a chain. You studied from your teacher, you studied from their teacher, there's a chain that goes to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I check your credentials. Yeah, you have a good standing in society, safe. But the problem is, anyone can claim to be an imam. Imam just means...
And I'll tell you, in Syria, there is people that are known to be very bad people, very non-religious, that became heads of like Islamic militias, which is very funny. Well, the problem, I think, in Syria, let's say, when people revolted against Assad, we have been living under a dictatorship for so long that people don't even know what liberalist is, what a socialist is, what a communist is. Those words, in a George Orwellian way, were taken off people's dictionary. Therefore, the motivation factor, how we can push people to go and fight and maybe be willing to die or motivate them against the dictator, fell into religion. And that is, I think, because of a lack of political consciousness. So in certain contexts...
Let me give you an example, Saif. And apologies, because I have to pray as well, but I've thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with you. I thought it was really stimulating, and I hope we're going to have it again. Are you here next week as well?
I hope I will come back. It was really nice to be here.
Very good. It was just in my mind. What was the last thing that you said you might trigger?
About lack of ideology, therefore religion can be motivation, about certain non-religious people who became leaders of militia, stuff like that. Like, for them, religion filled the void. And if they were Hindu, that would have been like their motivational factor to form a militia. And because they were Muslim, that was... So I think...
It's like, even when you talk about the first suicide bombers, Tamil Tigers, yeah, political ideology. Then you had a group, it's a Jewish group, yeah. Then they would do that, and then in fact, Saif, there's a really good book by Pape. It's called Dying to Win, and he's looked at suicide cases, suicide bombing cases, and he concluded that pre-9/11, pre-Iraq, the cases were very minimal, in fact negligible. Yeah. However, as the surge of colonization and illegal warfare increased, and I would also say, don't take my word for it, check it yourself. There are other studies that have taken place and that conclude the same thing, that foreign occupation increases terrorism, increases radicalization. In fact, there was a research done that correlates drone attacks to rise of extremism, and this has been accepted by military leaders in the US, but they still do it. Why? Because the infrastructure's there. It's been the investments have taken place.
I totally agree. Oppression, injustice leads to extremism in all its variants, in all its colors.
And also, Saif, would you also agree in this day and age that the religion or the countries that are mostly under warfare occupation are Muslim countries? Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine. Okay, brilliant.
I'm not going to comment on why or where the conflict starts, but it's a big discussion, many discussions.
And that's why, I've got Asr prayer and sun's coming down. Even last week I delayed it also. I'm going to pray 5 minutes and then I can come back and we can speak, but if you have to go, I can understand.
I'll see my friend if we have to go.
She's there.
Or that I'll see you next week.
Saif, wallahi, it was a real pleasure speaking to you.
You too also.
And speaking to people like yourself that have seen certain things, but they're still able to have a rational, a positive. You have a mashallah nice smile also.
Thank you.
It's really needed, and I encourage that also. And I'll be here. I'm not going to be here next week. I'll probably be here the week after, inshallah. So if you want to speak, I have a channel on YouTube called Smile2jannah.
Smile2jannah, okay.
So if you ever want to kind of hook up for a cup of tea or something, message me on Instagram, inshallah.
Okay.
And Smile is back. we can meet, inshallah.
It was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank
Look
you.
after yourself, safe. Inshallah.
Paid interview. Just go in like.
Thank you for being willing to discuss with me. I live in Norway. In Norway, there's very few Arabs. There's very few Muslims generally, and I know people can be ugly on the internet. I know that what a lot of people think about people like me and what we should do.